Hi everyone, this is Alan McKay. Welcome to episode 125. I'm speaking with Chris Do, the founder of Blind. Let's dive in.
Welcome to the Alan McKay Podcast. Alan is an Emmy Award-winning visual effects artist and mentor to many leading industry experts. Listen in as Alan talks with other industry leaders in film, video games, and visual effects about their experience, lessons, and methodology. Alan will teach you pivotal advice to fast-track your career, better your skills, and reach your ultimate dream job. Check out the latest episodes on alanmckay.com.
All right, so welcome to a brand new episode. I'm really excited about this one. I'm going to be chatting with Chris Do, who is the CEO and founder of Blind, a design and branding firm in Los Angeles, based in Santa Monica. Chris is a massive influencer in design, as well as just a really insightful guy. The few chats I've had with Chris have always just really left an impression, as well as just seeing the work that Blind puts out. Obviously, you probably heard of them. They've done stuff for Xbox, for Riot Games, A&E, Spike TV, ESPN, Google, Honda, Justin Timberlake, you name it. So I really love this episode because we dive into so much, but more importantly, more of the insights and a lot of really deep subjects that I think are really more valuable for you, the audience, than necessarily just reflecting on projects and achievements, but more about all of us and how we can get a lot more results and achievements ourselves in our careers. So I found this one to be very valuable, and I kind of expected it to be before going in, just knowing what I know of Chris and just what he's able to really bring to the table. So this was really a fun episode. I got a lot from it, and I hope you do as well. Just a heads up, as I mentioned, I got a lot of really cool episodes coming out. I'm really excited because, obviously we've been doing a lot of interview episodes, but I've got a lot of more solo episodes as well as the boot camp, everything else coming out. Right now for me, January has been more about getting the rest of the year in place. And I hope it is for a lot of you as well. But it's definitely kind of the quiet before the storm for me. So trying to get everything I can in order before I kind of hit the ground running with the rest of the year. But it definitely means that, there is a bit of a lull period while I get everything going. But I'm excited about this. I'm excited to see what 2018 brings for all of us. I'm still getting caught up on emails. So if you have been sending me emails over Christmas, I apologize. I'm keep telling myself and my team, tomorrow I'm going to get onto some email and things like that. I'm just kind of getting snowballed behind on everything, but I will get there. I will. Okay, so I'm going to leave this there. I advise you to check out the show notes. There's a lot of really great insights in this episode, as well as quotes, links to all the reference and everything else from the episode, as well as everything else. So if you want to check that out, go to alanmckay.com/125 for episode 125. And as I mentioned, we're working on a new website. It's still a few weeks away, but for me, it's going to be the new home. It's kind of weird, but basically I've had a website forever that I've basically pretended didn't exist because I just felt it's so slow and ugly. But this is one that's going to be built specifically around giving as much content, as much value, and helping everyone on their journey, no matter where they're coming in from. Because obviously there is a lot of people who are coming from more of a visual effects background. Then there's others who are in design and games and more of creative spaces that aren't really focused on visual effects, but more importantly on their career. So I've got everything for everyone. We've been working on a new official hardware guide, a new productivity book. I'm working on a few guides on switching careers. So if you're specifically wanting to switch out of, let's say, a corporate job into more of an art career, but doing it intelligently, safely, and planned, I'm working on something about that, how to break into the industry. I'm working on a lot of career videos. I want to start regularly updating my YouTube, which will be new to me because it's getting tongue-tied here. It's definitely a bit of a neglected baby of mine as well. So for me, like I said, it's kind of like getting all those pieces in order early in the year. But I'm really excited about this just because it's going to be a platform for me to start giving as much value as I can. There's going to be a lot of tutorials for Max, for Houdini, maybe a little bit for Maya, definitely a lot for compositing and Nuke and After Effects. I'm going to be doing so much, and I'm excited about that, but also just getting a lot of help from my team in terms of all of us being able to contribute to that space. So I know for a while I've been kind of mentioning there's a website coming, but for me it's right around the corner. We're just putting the finishing touches on it, and it's been ridiculous, but yeah, it's looking awesome, and I think I've invested someone's small salary into developing it. It's definitely been a bit of a investment, but so keep an eye out for that. But along with that will come the rebranding of the podcast as well. So there's going to be a new introduction, can I say jingle, kind of score to it, as well as art and everything else, and more of a platform for how we display notes and everything else. And that's going to be part of the website too. So yeah, lots of exciting stuff. I'm excited. So I'll leave it there. Let's dive into this episode with Chris Do. And again, check out the show notes, alanmckay.com/125. And feel free to leave a comment in the comment section. Okay, so let's dive in. Again, thanks for taking the time to do this. And Chris, if you want to quickly just introduce yourself and also mention a little bit about Blind.
Sure. Thanks for having me, first of all. My name is Chris Do. I'm the founder of Blind, a motion design firm in which I started in 1995. And now we've evolved into becoming a brand design consultancy. And the other company I founded is called TheFutur, and that's an education and entertainment platform. We teach mostly through YouTube, but we have some courses and kits. And those are the two companies I run.
Cool. That's awesome, man. That's really cool. And I'd love to dive a little bit into kind of your roots a little bit, just because I always find like everyone has their own story and it's always a little bit different. Some people, they just kind of fell into, being a creative from the get-go, and other people had the struggle along the way or came into it late. So for you, did you always love design, or when did you kind of really discover it as something that you wanted to really pursue?
I've always loved being creative, drawing, imagining things, making things with my hands, but I have to admit the word design was not part of my lexicon. It wasn't something that I didn't know anybody in my world that was doing design as a profession. It wasn't until I was into my late teens, when I was 17 years old, that I was working at a silk screening shop in my last year in high school.
Cool.
That I actually met a graphic designer. And once I met that person, that reality, the dream that I've had became real and became very tangible, and it manifested in this man. His name is Dean Walker. He's a practicing graphic designer. And that's when I knew, like, it hit me in the face like a lightning bolt. Now I know what I need to do. This is it.
That's great. You found your calling right then and there. That's cool. Mm-hmm. And I guess in the early days, did you have a lot of struggle, or were you pretty much like, okay, now I know what I need to do, I'm just going to go out and do it and, rock everyone's world? Or, how did it kind of take on from there?
It is pretty strange in the way this works, and it's interesting. I'm in my 40s now, and I read books about finding what it is you're supposed to be doing. And I think it's true even back then, even as a 17-year-old kid. Like, once I knew what I was doing, instead of looking into the future with anxious or anxiety, being anxious about the future, now I looked forward towards it with anticipation, because I kind of had an idea as to what direction to head in. And things seemed to materialize themselves from the moment in which I knew I wanted to be a designer. So I remember telling my mom and dad I want to become a designer. And just by serendipity, my boss at that time, his name is Brad. Brad said, "Chris, what do you want to do?" Before, if I didn't know, I wouldn't have said anything. So I said, "I want to be a designer." He said to me, "You need to go to Art Center. That's where you need to go." So I went home and told my parents, I'm going to go to Art Center. I didn't even know where it was, what city it was in, what programs they had, but everything seemed to kind of fall into place. I moved down to San Diego to live with my brother, who gave me space to work on my portfolio and to then meet an instructor who cared passionately or deeply about my own success and helped me to get my way into Art Center. So everything seemed to line up, and it gave me a gigantic boost of confidence, because you go through life trying to figure out, who am I, what's my identity? And without that, you're just kind of a house of cards. Any kind of shift in the wind or direction can topple you over. For me, once I found that, everything did seem to fall into place. Now, of course, there are little bumps along the way, but it wasn't like because I was confused about who I was.
Mm-hmm. No, that's great. And like, it's really awesome that you had that support too, because I know some people, and this is like a reoccurring theme, but some people, they get their parents saying like, "Oh, it's not a real job, go out and be a lawyer," and not having that resistance from the people around you, especially the people that you subconsciously do want to impress or get their approval of, is really important. And I think that's so critical too, is the fact that once you do kind of start to resonate with what you want to pursue, that's when you start to connect the dots and see all these opportunities that might have just like flown right over your head before, but suddenly now they're, you see them everywhere. And, that's something that I think, you don't have that once in a lifetime opportunity. It's constant opportunities all the time. It's just a lot of the time we're, no pun intended, but blind to really seeing a lot of this stuff until you do kind of find your calling. And then suddenly you just see all those opportunities and you're able to start to jump on them right away. So that's really cool. And yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that I want to just take this opportunity, since you're talking about this, to kind of shine a light on my parents' relationship and how they made room for me to pursue something. So for sure, at this point in time, my dad was not into this idea at all. And a lot of credit goes to my mom in shielding me from that and saying, he needs to do his thing. And I never knew how my dad felt. It wasn't until after I graduated school, started my business, that then the truth comes out that my dad wasn't into this idea. And so one parent, in this case, my mom, who is in a very traditional Asian family where it's very patriarchal, and she stood up and stopped certain things from happening so that I can continue to pursue my dream. So I just want to point that out, that every once in a while, I think we need a champion in our lives, whether it's an older brother, sister, a friend of the family, a coach, a relative, a mentor, somebody like that, to really help make space for us, to allow us to explore who we want to become, even though we don't know and we're not totally confident in it either.
That's awesome. That's so cool. And I guess for you, did you have a lot of mentors early in your career? I guess between kind of pursuing that path as well as later getting into your work career?
Now, so here's the tricky part. It's only upon reflection, looking back on my life, that I would call them quote unquote mentors. And they were just people in my life, like it could have been a teacher. One of my mentors, I suppose, is my brother. Now, my older brother, who I don't think he ever thought of himself as that. And I didn't think of him as that either, but he saw things in me that I didn't know. And he just left space as well. Here's an example. I think I was probably 16 years old at that time, and I had expressed a lot of creative tendencies where I would sculpt things with wire. I took metal shop and I was just doing stuff. And he was like, "This is like art, man. You should go and sell this." And I would dismiss it and think, "Oh, this is just something dumb I just made." And he took it upon himself. He's 4 years older than me, to fly me down to San Diego to go to, I think it's Spike and Mike's film festival. Like, I didn't even know what animated films were, really, these animated shorts. And he was just exposing me to the world. And he got me my first credit card to say, like, "I see that you're trying to be an entrepreneur. We need to start establishing credit for you." And he helped to buy me my first computer. So in a way, my older brother was a mentor in that he just made space available to me for me to dream.
That's awesome. And yeah, I think that at the same time, he's a bit of an enabler as well, just someone who, rather than, I think that you've got mentors and you've got anti-mentors, that people that, if anything, are going to discourage you, and it's usually more to do with them than to do with you. But, having those people around you who are, going to, as you said, champion you and really encourage you and give you those opportunities, like, that's really important, because first of all, we can't do it all alone, and on top of that, you are kind of like looking for whether or not you can do it, and all it takes is one or two people kind of putting those seeds of doubt in you to crush those dreams and go do what everyone else is doing. But when you got the opposite, that really pours fuel on the fire. So I think that's amazing.
Yeah, and it's only that I'm a mature person now that I can look back and be grateful about that. Otherwise, in the moment, I didn't even recognize it.
No, that's great. And yeah, I love that kind of moment of clarity that you might get in past tense, like looking back and reflecting. So I have that a lot, just kind of looking back and having a lot of realizations now about a lot of my upbringing and early career as well. I was curious about that too. Like, did you always kind of have that entrepreneurial bug to want to build businesses, or really kind of see things with more altitude than just being in the trenches, making art and having fun?
I think I did, and I can cite some examples, but I kind of think of myself as a person who's smarter than average, but not the smartest person in the room. And that kind of puts you in this weird, dangerous place where the smartest people in the room are really focused. They're great students. They learn, they memorize things. And then there's, like, I think on the other end of the spectrum, people that aren't that bright. But I was just smart enough to be dangerous and lazy. And part of that is just looking around and saying, is this something I need to be doing again and again? And I would exploit, I think, opportunities and kind of become that arbitrage where I would look for things to buy at a low price and sell at a higher price. So I remember in grade school, I would ask my mom to go buy popsicles in bulk and then try and sell them to the kids because I got out a little bit earlier than the other class, and I would run home, grab a cooler and come back and sell them at 25 cents or whatever, and it would cost me 10 cents or 5 cents a piece.
You're a junior
So I was just
Costco.
trying to find something to do. And I remember even earlier than that, I loved to go fishing, and we would go crayfishing, and I would catch them not because I wanted anything to do with them, but I knew that there was a neighbor who wanted them, and so I would try to sell it to him. And none of this made any sense really because I was selling candy, popsicles, crayfish, whatever it is I could get. Anything that I could get my hands on, if I can sell it for a little bit more, I was going to hustle. And it wasn't until I found design that I actually had something of real value that I personally could add to the equation versus just becoming the middleman between two things.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's really cool. And I guess, I mean, if anything, you're identifying demand, and you're able to meet that, and then being able to, I'm sure, take those experiences and that mindset later to design, where obviously there's going to be a demand for doing something that people need to represent them, and being able to supply it, I think is really cool. And that's great. Like early in your career, and I guess during your school phase too, like where did you have a lot of designers or artists or other creatives that really inspired you? Like not necessarily people immediately in your life, but people you looked up to, or really kind of refer to their work quite a lot?
There's, I want to say that I'm not that cultured, and it wasn't like I was exposed to all these amazing artists and designers and became aware of what they were. So I had this odd fascination with Patrick Nagel, the illustrator who did a bunch of these 80s style illustrations. And I remember seeing the calendars he would design for Tower Records. It's a very distinctive style. Mm-hmm. If anybody knows what I'm talking about, it just becoming fascinated with it. It has it's like tied now to the 80s, so it's not something that you would want to introduce into the market today. But that's the only person I was really aware of. So I was fascinated by his work, and other airbrush artists. Nobody that I can name right now, but this is all kind of pre-computer, and so this was my only way of expressing myself, which is to use an airbrush and try and do paintings and illustrations that way.
That's cool. That's really cool. That's one thing I loved the first time I went to LA after being kind of sheltered in Australia, was just the amount of amazing art books and things like that I'd never ever see at any library or store in Australia. And just I remember coming back with a giant suitcase from Hollywood, just from the few bookstores around there, of just like Coop Art and a bunch of other really awesome artists and designers. But you're right. Like I think these days with the internet, it's a lot easier just to jump on DeviantArt or Pinterest or wherever you want to go and find amazing stuff. But other than that, like beforehand, it's a lot harder to kind of get immersed into those things that you really, use to drive your passion every day. And I guess for you in the beginning, like, did you find it like there were obviously, and by the way, I'll just give you a heads up that I went to a Killers concert last night, and I'm extremely hungover, so if my vocabulary is pretty basic, that's why. But it was awesome, by the way. And but yeah, I mean, I was just kind of curious with your diving into design as well. I mean, obviously, design is such a competitive area, and especially to try and stand out from everyone else. Like, did you find in school that there were a lot of people who kind of were hitting the ground running with design and doing amazing stuff, or did you kind of land in there and realize that there's people attending hoping to kind of get good rather than just being a natural when they came into it?
I think if I'm remembering this correctly, I'm trying to do this accurately, but for whatever reason, I think design came easier to me than for a lot of my classmates, and maybe I was a little bit more focused, or technology didn't scare me because I was exposed to computers and things like that. Yeah, I remember in community college going to San Diego City College, I learned how to use Illustrator and using the 512K beige Mac with a monochrome screen. Mm-hmm. And my instructor was showing me how to use the tools. And I remember other students kind of struggling with the concept of moving the mouse. And I've already been exposed to that for years at that point. And so I grabbed the technology quickly and I started to express myself, and it felt very empowering. So I guess for a little while, for about a year or so, I took it for granted that I could put in minimal effort and get results that were better than most. And so it created maybe a slightly cocky person who also didn't put his best effort forward. And it showed. I would do the homework the night before, literally just hang out at Kinko's and pacing up things or printing things out and assembling things very last minute. And it did come to a certain point where I realized to myself, this is not what I want to do. This is not how I'm going to become good at this. And once I'm able to get into arts, then I'm going to have to adopt a totally different work ethic and mentality, because otherwise I'd be throwing away a ton of money in tuition and not getting much out of it. So I came to that realization, and I started to change my entire life, my work habits, my ideas around myself and the things that I would do.
I think it's really great when you can kind of, put that responsibility on yourself, because I think a lot of people, they kind of, I don't know, I see people who are really motivated and they're so self-disciplined, and I think that it's something that they've had to always kind of make that decision themselves to do. You're not going to get someone who is lazy and needs to be told what to do over and over, who is ever going to have that mindset themselves, because they're going to condition more to have someone else get them to do it. But when you take it on yourself, I think that's the kind of, the rocket fuel that allows you to really start to, embrace that independence and really kind of start to level up, I think. Because I can look back at a lot of people I know who've kind of made that decision themselves about like, look, I'm better than this. I don't want to be doing, this level of work or having this level of effort that I put into things. Like I want, work hard at this. And it's usually at that point that mindset switch happens. That's really cool. And for you, like, when did you get your big break? Like going from college, did you go straight from design school into to working, or was it, a bit of a lull, or how did you kind of make that initial break into the industry?
I was very fortunate because as I was finishing up my schooling, right before I finished my last semester, a friend of mine got a job at an ad agency in Seattle called Cole & Weber. And she said, Chris, I need a partner to work with. I'm a writer and I'd love to work with you. And would you consider sending your portfolio? So I was thinking, I'm not built for advertising. My portfolio is really about graphic design. So I put 4 pieces together and I sent it off. And to my surprise, I was given a job offer. So I had a little dilemma to kind of figure out, should I stay in school? Do I postpone one by one semester? Or what do I do? But ultimately, I decided to go ahead and go to work, and it was an amazing experience. I got to work at an ad agency, work on some print ads and TV commercials, things like that. And it was very exciting. So that was my first taste into what professional life was. And I learned quickly that just the work ethic that I had and the drive and my design sensibility was going to be something that the industry would recognize. My boss gave me a promotion. He gave me the corner office, all these kinds of things. And I haven't even finished school yet. I'm barely 20-something years old, and I'm seeing the reward on the other end because I've toiled over design for the last 3.5 years going to art school. And now I'm starting to be able to reap the rewards. So there wasn't much of a lull. I worked at the ad agency, and it was wonderful. I went back to school, and I was flying back from Seattle to LA, seeming like every other weekend. And he would fly me up, work a few days, and then fly back home to schoolwork and do that. And I felt like on top of the world. Ultimately, long story short, advertising was not in the cards for me. So I finished school. I quit my job, finished school, and then I started to look for a job. Luck would have it that my friends from school were successful, and I wanted to work with some of them because I thought they were amazing. And I got a job at Epitaph Records as a graphic designer, and I worked there for, I don't know, I think like a month and a half, 2 months. Decided that wasn't right for me either. Quit and went freelance. So there really wasn't much of a lull. I've been working ever since I've been, I guess, in school and out of school.
That's cool. That's really cool. It kind of reminds me a little bit about our mutual friend Ash Thorpe, how he was doing the complete opposite, where he was living in San Diego and like during his prologue days having to catch a train all the way from San Diego to LA every day and then come back at nighttime, every single day of the week, which sounded pretty insane. But yeah, I mean, I think that again, like when you want something so bad, you kind of put in all the effort that you need to really make it happen, rather than, I guess, some people are going to be like, oh, well, that's too much work. I'm just going to find something that's a bit more easy and accommodating. That's cool. And like with, I guess, like some of your earlier projects, like where do you think, let's say in the first 10 years, were some of the projects you had the most growth or really kind of had those aha moments, like the projects that really kind of impacted your career the most?
I think the first time that we did a full commercial, like beginning to end, I think that was for Partnership for Drug-Free America, and like an anti-meth spot that we did. It was like typographically driven, and it was more art than it was advertising, and that felt amazing in terms of like what we could do. And for me, kind of being mostly self-taught in the motion design space, it was all an adventure and just trying to figure things out. So everything would seem super scary until I did it like 5 times, and then it became a little easier. But our big break came in being able to get access to doing national TV work. So we worked on some Buick car commercials, which led us to Mitsubishi car commercials, which were regional TV spots, like those like put $2.99 down, 2.7% APR. Really kind of boring, boraxy stuff, but then that led to doing the Mitsubishi national stuff, and then the floodgates opened. And from that point, kind of riding the gravy train as the .com surge was coming on strong. I remember several times, like, because we were a small shop and we didn't have qualified, trained people to work. There was only a handful of us, and it wasn't like the three schools were pumping out motion design artists because it was barely a thing. And just realizing like we're being overworked, I can't do any more work. And I told my producer at that time, I can't take on any more work. The only way you're going to be able to take these jobs is if you double the budget. Thinking that would be the end of the story. And then my producer would come back, I've doubled the budget, Chris. They still accept it and they still want you to work on it.
Wow.
And that's how it used to be. Now, everybody longs for the glory days. Those were the glory days. This is prior to the .com bubble popping in 2000, 2001.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's really cool. And I guess like we're jumping around a little bit timeline-wise, but in 1995, like you started Blind then, right? So what was it like? I mean, anytime starting a new business, I'm sure it's a pretty scary experience and pretty overwhelming for you. Like, did you have a lot of hesitation going into it, or was it just something that you felt you had to do to kind of attract the clients you wanted and do the sort of work that you want?
I got to be honest with you. I had zero hesitation because this is something that I've been dreaming about for a really long time. So when the opportunity came up to start a company, I just jumped on it instantly. And a lot of people, when I tell this story, they think, oh my gosh, you're so brave. And I say, no, I'm not brave. I'm the opposite of brave. I'm a coward because I thought about it in a very rational way. I thought that once I graduate school, I have student loans and they're deferred for, I think back then it was a year. So I thought I had this great cushion, this window of opportunity to strike. I'm 21, 22 years old. I have a year to kind of goof off and do anything. As long as I can pay rent and grab a burger or something, I'm good, which in those days was not a lot of money. I could probably sustain or subsist on probably $2,000 a month, which is $24K a year. That's nothing, right? And I would be fine. So I looked at it like, this is the time to do it because as I get older and more obligations and my lifestyle starts to change, it's going to be harder to take a risk. And so this is the least risky thing to do is to start a business right now. It was a pretty dumb thing to do because I didn't have any real portfolio to talk about. I don't have any contacts. There's no network to speak of. I don't even have professional business practices, no marketing game, no sales, no business skills. And yet I did it and it worked out. And now when people ask me, should I do that? I would say you should not do it unless you're stupid like me. There's a lot smarter ways to do that if you want to start a business. Going out there with no experience and no business acumen and trying to do it, it was just luck. It was luck for two things, okay? And I'm not trying to discredit myself, but I'm saying that the motion design industry wasn't even a thing. And we were at the beginning of a wave, at the epicenter of what was going to go down. So we're in Los Angeles, motion graphics is becoming a thing, and the tools and the technology were just becoming available with After Effects 1.0, desktop machines that were kind of okay to kind of render things. In prior to that moment in time, the boxes, I don't know if you remember this or not, Alan, the Henrys and the Harrys were like $1 million boxes and they're paint boxes, right?
Quantel boxes, all those. Like you're getting a massive loan and paying that off with $1,000 hour rates just to kind of pay it back over 10 years. Yeah. So
the barrier to entry was great. The tools and the technology weren't there, except for that moment in which I was alive in 1995 and being ready to do this. So the opportunities were there. The economy was surging. .coms were kind of just coming into the thing, and the internet was available. Right time, right place. Even a fool like me could succeed. We don't live in those times anymore, I don't think. Or maybe there's greener pastures somewhere, but it's not in the industry that I started in.
That's great. That's cool. I love that. And like, I guess within that, you mentioned for now, like a lot of people, you wouldn't recommend just following in your footsteps directly, but like what advice would you give for people who wanted to start a company now, given that there is a huge saturation of design firms out there, but at the same time, there is also a lot of amazing resources that you don't necessarily need to have a company to profit online or, to get design work?
Yeah, there's a couple of pieces of advice I'm going to give here, and hopefully we can unpack them together because it's pretty dense for me to be saying. Mm-hmm. So I believe in that the era of classical design, and by classical design, I'm borrowing from John Maeda here and his talk about 3 different kinds of design. But classical design is that there is such thing as making something perfect. It's all about the craft, and there's one way, the right way to do something. And we see these kind of in the heroes that we all choose and saying, wow, they make such amazing work, right? And I think that era is gone. And why is that? Because the market has become a global marketplace where buyers of design have access to people from all over the world in different socioeconomic backgrounds, where for somebody living in Egypt, an annual salary might be $5,000 if they're doing really well in life, and they're very talented as well. And that's just one group, right? One region. So how do you compete with that if it's all about the craftsmanship? Because to the buyer, they can't discern between something that's good and something that's great. That gap, they're not willing to pay for. So if you stay in the space of being a quote unquote traditional or classical designer, you're going to be in deep trouble. So that's one problem. So here's what I think. What I think you have to do is you can still love the craft, but what you have to do is add another dimensionality to what it is that you do. And I think that's about community building, like things that you're doing, Alan. You're doing a podcast aside from running your company because you're trying to gather kindred spirits that believe what you believe. I'm going to let that car pass. And if they believe what you believe, then you build a community, and that's power and that's leverage, and you become an influencer, and then you become less and less dependent on clients and more on a community that really wants to support you and see you succeed. We see designers out there right now that aren't even classically trained, that might not even be that good, but they either curate content or they do instructional work, or they do something, or they're maybe a very charismatic personality, and they're able to build community around what they do. I believe that's part of the future. Mm-hmm. The second thing is, I think all creative people, regardless of how you describe yourself, you could be a photographer, an architect, a modeler, you need to learn about business. Todd McFarlane talks about this. He says the only reason why he was successful as a comic book artist was because he was one of the few artists that could walk in the room and speak the language of business. So he said, I'm an artist and I do business. So I became bilingual. I could talk to the business people and they're like, okay, Todd gets it. This is about marketing. It's about licensing. It's not just about drawing cartoons all day. And so I think it's essential that all undergraduate programs, starting from the freshman year, that the program be almost split in half between the design of things and the business. Yep. That you need that.
Yeah.
Those are two things that I would say, you got to think about: building community, studying business, and learning about how to market and working in the digital age. It's very different than the way it used to be.
No, I'm so glad you said that because, you hit it right on the head. Like I think it's so critical these days that artists need to realize that, like, even if you look at it like a studio or a company, like, even if you are a freelancer, an individual, you are a company, and you need to have that PR firm, you need to have that CPA, you need to have the person who's managing everything. At the same time, you need to be the worker, you need to be IT, you need to have all your hands in all these different areas, but at the same time, like, you need to start to treat things like a business. And I say it all the time, but like the whole starving artist mentality that people kind of embrace that as an excuse is like, well, we're not meant to be successful. We could take pride in the fact that, we're poor and we don't make money, and all these underappreciative kind of mindsets that we have. And like, it's just so wrong. Like, I look at the people who are successful and who are doing the projects that they want to do because they attract that is because they put in the work and they get themselves out there. I always say, like, you could be the greatest artist in the world, but if no one knows who you are, then how are you going to get work? And I think it's just so critical for all of us to really embrace business and realize, like, we are in a time where you've got to do that just as much as whatever it is you're passionate about. You got to surround yourself with all the tools to be able to really accelerate that.
Absolutely. I think about this a lot, right? I think that there's this very outdated idea about what success means for creative people. And that's the idea that you're an artist. Nobody tells you what to do. You kind of paint in a studio space somewhere and that's what you do. And money isn't important. And that's and we talk about this on our show sometimes about, I remember some kids saying, well, what makes you a pro? And then somebody answered, well, when you get paid. That's not what makes you a pro. What makes you a pro is when what you do is your primary source of income. So if you're an actor and you wait tables and that's how you make a living, you're not a professional actor yet until that becomes your primary source of income. So when I read books like The Win Without Pitching Manifesto, where and talks about this, he's like, do you want to have a hobby? Are you a hobbyist? Do you want to paint and doodle and do things kind of on the side? Well, if that's what you want, that's fine. But the rest of us, we want to be a professional. We want to have a business. And now we have to kind of learn how to think and run our companies. And even if it's an individual practice, like a business. And it scares a lot of people. But I'm telling you right now, The alternative to me is much scarier. To wake up one day in your 50s or in your 60s and realize you had this latent talent that you never fully exploited, and the woulda, coulda, shoulda ideas start running through your mind. To me, that is a much more regretful story to kind of live than to say, I went for it. I learned how to do business, and I learned how to do commerce, and I helped to grow companies and businesses, and I was rewarded for it. And some of my art friends don't understand it, and that's okay.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah, I mean, absolutely. You got to get out of your comfort zone and take those risks, because without that, you're going to stay in your bubble and do what's safe. But it means that you're white knuckling this job that doesn't give you that fulfillment. And I always think that if you're not doing what you find fulfilling as your job, as your career, as your calling, then you're going to end up going home every day and doing it as a hobby anyway to get that fulfillment. So doing it as a career just means that you're getting that fulfillment every day, and you're happy within that environment, rather than doing a job that, let's say, architecture or accounting or whatever, that if that isn't something that you find passionate and you're wishing to pursue a career in design, then every night you're going to be going home kind of resenting yourself for not being willing to take those risks and try to pursue it. And I've seen people do it the right way and the wrong way, because some people say, okay, great, I'm just going to move to LA and I'm going to become the best designer out there, or I'm going to get off the famous bus and become an actor. And I think that it does require you to actually plan ahead and think and figure out the contingencies. Listen to the things that you are afraid of. Like if I go and pursue my dream career and I fail, then XYZ will happen. I think it's good to actually listen to that and think about like what are the worst case scenarios, but then build contingency plans around those until it is to a point where it is safe for you to do it, knowing that like the worst of the worst is not really that bad. So whether it is saving up money or taking a unpaid vacation and going to work in a different career just to see whether you can make it, or working on the side, whatever it is. And I'll loop back to you in a moment just to kind of talk about that, because I'm sure there are these days with the internet, Upwork, Freelancer, all these different amazing services that you can at least start to build your portfolio and start to get paid and start to get that confidence too, that holy shit, people are actually hiring me to do this. Like I could actually go for it and actually turn pro. For you, like what are your thoughts on that? Like, do you think that rather than necessarily starting a company today, that's something that you could actually pursue using all these tools without having to take the risks that earlier on were such a big deal?
When you say the risk, what are you referring to? Like, what are my options here? What are the two things I'm considering?
What are the risks when you start a company? I mean, obviously,
okay.
Running out of money or security, all the things that we really value as being necessities in our life. So I mean, when you're starting a company, like usually there are going to be the risks of just security, especially, but failing at achieving the goals that you set out to do.
Yeah. This is going to sound like it's a little bit contradictory here, but I'm going to say that nothing is ever as hard as you think, nor as easy. Let me try and tackle that on both ends, right? Some people think, great, I've been working somewhere. It's time for me to start my own business. It's because I look at what the owner is doing, and they get to drive the fancy car, and they get to go home early, and everything's gravy. And so everything will just fall into my lap. It's not that easy. It's also not as hard as you think it is, in that you think, oh my gosh, I need all this capital. Where do I start? And there's so many complicated process files. You got to file your tax returns and all these kind of complicated things. The truth is, it's really somewhere in the middle. So let's do a real kind of gut check thing here. If you want to run your own business, you have to be able to answer affirmatively in a couple of things. One is, are you okay with the idea of failure? Is it okay for it not to work out, for you to go totally bust and rejoin the workforce as an employee? Is that okay? And that's got to be okay for you. If you're willing to start, you got to be willing to fail. Mm-hmm. And if you want great reward, you have to make some calculated risk. You have to be able to put something out there. And if your ego's okay with that, and mine is, then okay, you pass that step. The next thing is, are you willing to do what other people aren't willing to do? Because everybody wants to have that 9 to 5 and have barbecues on the weekends. But the problem with the business owner is there really isn't a time off, because typically what happens is you're managing growth, you're looking for new opportunities, and you have to stay ahead of the curve. That means the rest of your life is going to involve reading, researching, keeping your eye on the horizon, going to trade shows and events, going to seminars, speaking, going completely out of your comfort zone. That's what's in store for you. Are you okay with managing people? Are you okay looking at a bunch of creative people and saying, some of you guys are going to work out and some of you aren't? Some of you guys have the talent that I need, and some of the talent is not going to be beneficial to me. Can you manage creative people? Because they're very hard to manage. So those are some skill sets. Are you comfortable talking to clients about money? Are you comfortable negotiating? Are you comfortable asking for new business? So these are the kinds of general questions that you could need to have answered in your mind. Like maybe they're like, I'm not comfortable today, but I'm willing to learn. I'm willing to put in the work. But at least to have a realistic point of view on that, to kind of have realistic expectations. Otherwise, you're going to be for a world of hurt.
That's great. I love it. Yeah, I absolutely love that. And just to kind of loop back a little bit, because I don't want to let this go, but one of the other things you talked about before was building for artists to really understand and learn to deal with business, but at the same time, building a community. And I always think of that article Kevin Kelly wrote, 1,000 True Fans. But once you have those 1,000 true fans, you can create a sustainable living off of that. But like for you, do you want to talk a little bit about, as creatives, like how there's a necessity for us to build community around what we do?
There's a necessity. Well, the 1,000 true fans or the 10,000 fans, whatever it is, it allows you to have a lifestyle business where you don't have to work that many hours and you could live well. We're not talking about going out and buying a Lamborghini or something, but you can live well, in the American standard. And I think that's fine. I mean, for me, I'm trying to do this weird thing. It's like the hat trick where I want to have a business where I draw passive income, but it's a big business that is worth a lot. And so it requires a different kind of community building.
You said that there's two things everyone should really learn, and one is to understand, like having community, like building a community around their work and what they do. So I was just asking more if you can elaborate on that.
There's a guy that I know, and I met him through the internet, like how I meet most people these days. His name is Jonathan Rudolph, and most people don't know his name, but they do know his alias, and his alias is Logo Inspirations on Instagram, where I think he has over 500,000 followers now. And Jonathan has a very interesting career because he's originally from Sri Lanka, relocates to Australia, and is working as a professional graphic designer. He's really into logos. He started posting early on in the Instagram game and grew his audience really fast, and it's a full-time job for him. He draws now more in passive residual income from his hobby, quote unquote, than he does in his real job, which gives him a ton of flexibility, gives him a ton of leverage when it comes to negotiating now. And it's very interesting because I'm pretty sure really soon that's the only thing he'll be doing. So he's turned his love, his passion, his hobby, built a community around it, and now they basically support him by sending money to affiliates or things that he sponsors or ways that they can keep what he does alive. And so that's a really wonderful story about how somebody does something like that. There's another person, his name is Seb Lester, which many of you guys that are in the design space will know. He's an incredible calligrapher. And I assumed that Seb Lester had been doing this forever. And then I read up on his bio, and he's a graphic designer based out of the UK. And he decides one day, not that long ago, that he wants to do calligraphy. So he teaches himself calligraphy, and he becomes really amazing at this thing. And he has over 1 million followers on Instagram. I tried hiring Seb for a project for a client. And it's like he wouldn't even call you back. It's like, I don't do commission work anymore. And I was thinking, this is incredible. Like, I'm pissed, and I'm also in admiration, right? I'm in awe because he doesn't need to be in that place where he has to work for clients anymore. Because basically, whenever he feels like it, he writes a word. The pen is mightier than the sword. And it's this beautiful piece of calligraphy. He prints it out and he sells it. So for me, it's almost as if he can print money. Mm-hmm. His fan base is so big that if you make something, they will buy it. And that's how they support him. So it's kind of flipping the entire paradigm around a client vendor model to being an artist with a community or a fan base model. And I love that. That is how the future is supported. We're supported by people who, out of the goodness of their own heart, decide to contribute money to our organization, like KPCC or NPR. They decide to give us $5 every month, and that group of people who do that is growing. And so that's wonderful. They also buy our kits and products and courses, and we are able to hire full-time people to help build content for the future, purely based on the revenue we draw from the community that we serve.
That's great. That's so cool. No, thank you for talking about that, because I think it's important to really dive deeper onto it. And just to talk a little bit about Blind, just because again, like I think it's amazing that right away you have that laser focus of like what you want, and maybe being a little bit naive to it all at the same time works out well to like just dive right into doing something fearlessly. And for you, like what were the bigger challenges at the very beginning of like creating what is now like a massively successful design company, like getting off the ground and really kind of building it up? Like what were some of the areas that you need to get the most growth and have the most challenges?
The challenges of starting and growing Blind were many. One is, how do you get work? When you have no work, how do you get work? And so we went around talking to reps, sending them our reel. And of course, they had the reaction that they're supposed to have, which is, I can't represent you. You have no real professional work. There are no commercials here that I can go out and sell. Well, that's catch-22. Well, how do I get a rep who will only rep me if I have professional work? Because I can't get professional work. I need a rep. So you get stuck in that loop, right? So somewhere along the way, somebody sees something and is willing to take a chance. So the more goodwill that you build up, the greater your network, meaning the people that you know who are looking out for you and trying to help you as well, the more likely you are of having an opportunity to do that. And that is not in the cards for everybody, because you can sit around hoping for this to happen. It's not going to happen. Then that leads me to the second challenge, which is basically I have zero business skills at this point. I don't know what sales and marketing is. I didn't even know how to cut a legitimate reel. This is all part and parcel because I started a company with way too little experience and not knowing what I was doing. So now we have no sales team. I have no business skills to sell things. And if a client were to call me and ask me for a bid, I don't even know how to put together a proper bid. So the people on the other side are used to seeing bids a certain way. And you know this, Alan. They want to see a cover sheet. They want to see your markup. They want to see line items. They want to see a schedule. And it's all tied and tidy so that they can compare apples to apples. Well, when we put together a bid, it looked like a bid that you would put together for a print brochure. Couple line items, couple of numbers, and then there's the sum total. And how I got that number, is complete mystery because it wasn't based on any experience or knowledge. So that's kind of three very powerful strikes working against us. And I think, again, opportunity, luck, whatever you want to call it, more buyers than sellers. There were a lot more agencies at that point in time that wanted to buy something that only a handful of people could make. So I was put into that rotation of companies that they would talk to just because I was alive. And that's really all it was. So I wouldn't say that that's a good operating plan to bank on that happening. That's a very faulty one. Mm-hmm. So you have to overcome those things. So today, if you want to start a business, you should try to build up your PR chops. You should try to build up your community so that you enter into that conversation with leverage on your side and they kind of know who you are already.
Yeah, I think, again, going back to the whole comments about going pro, I think that when things start to change where instead of you having to go and always pursue the work, when you start to get clients coming to you saying that we want Blind to do our work, we're hoping that we can get Chris to manage this, to direct this, like that is when, that's a place that we all want to be at, where even as individuals, if instead of having to fire out our resume 100 times a day, it can be waking up in the morning and going to our inbox and just sitting down and kind of picking and choosing the projects that we want to do. And obviously there's so much legwork that, that you got to go through during those periods to build up to that point. But like, I think that is the holy grail for a lot of us, is to get to a place where, you've built enough of a rep that people want your style, want what only you can contribute to a project. And, yeah, but up until that point, it's always going to be like you've got to go through the painstaking work to get to that point.
The problem is our industry is full of gatekeepers, and you got to get through all the gatekeepers in order for you to be considered, right? So back in the day, it was the gatekeeper was a rep, and the rep would go meet the art buyer or producer on the other side, and if any one of these people didn't like your work, you're not going to go to the next step. And then they would bring it to the art director, the creative director, the writer, somebody, and they would say yes, and then they would take it to the account director and their boss and their team, and then that's a lot of people to say yes to you. Well, we live in the information age now. The gatekeepers can be circumvented. You can work around them, because if you build up enough of your own reputation, a body of work, like Beeple or Ash Thorpe, who are posting things pretty consistently, they have their own following. So what happens then is the gatekeeper is inverted now. Basically, the art directors and the buyers of art see your work, become your fan, long before an opportunity exists in their head or in their mind. So what I would say is this: if you're a young person, if you're 15, 13 years old, begin building your audience, your community today. Start documenting your work, putting it out there, building an audience, a fan base, so that by the time you're done with school, you already kind of have things set in place. I remember interviewing somebody for our show. Her name is Jeanette Liao. She started doing work on Instagram early on and grew her following out. And before she was ready to leave or go get a job somewhere, Nike started recruiting her, and now she's over at Nike. That wouldn't have happened 5 years ago. That wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. So that's the amazing time in which we live in. But if you're not playing along with the new rules of how design and community building work, you're working against yourself much, much harder than you need to.
That's great. That's really cool. The Nike people are actually the reason I'm hungover today, so I blame them. No, that's really awesome. And I'm just kind of curious about going back to like Blind in terms of projects. I mean, what are some of the more proudest ones, I guess, that you guys have worked on to date? Like some of the ones that you're really fond of the most?
Sure. For me personally, I got a lot of enjoyment and fulfillment out of the music video projects we worked on, more so than the commercial projects. They felt more like art, and you had time to tell a story, develop characters, and have arcs. And so for me, probably working on a music video for the Raveonettes, one was called Black and White, the other one was Heart of Stone. That's some of the most rewarding work for me because I love collaborating with artists, and it was a wonderful experience. And you got to see the full potential of your creativity, because rarely ever, in my experience, have artists say, that's a little bit too far. They don't say that. They're like, yes, and that's all they say. Mm-hmm. And as a studio, I think some of the other projects we worked on, mostly recently with Xbox, doing a bunch of these spots with the Eisenberg Group, that's some of the best work we've ever done. And the launching of the Xbox One X, that was really cool. Matthew was a lead on that.
Great.
We've done music videos for Coldplay, for Cinematic Orchestra, for, Lilac Wine. We've done a bunch of videos, Gnarls Barkley, Justin Timberlake. Those are really cool projects. Also because they're things that can tell an average person off the street, we worked on that, we created this thing, and they would know, versus, oh yeah, we worked on that one car commercial. What? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of cool to have that common touch point that if ever you have to pull a card out of your back pocket and try and relate to someone, let them know what you do, you just say something like that.
Cool. I love that. It's really awesome. Yeah, and so obviously music videos are one that I think for a lot of us, you got a lot more freedom there than you will in certain other areas, because I think that when you're pushing a brand, when you're pushing something for a company, you're pushing the product. Whereas with a music video, the music video is the product, and so therefore it's more a bit more open-ended. You can tell a story, you can just focus on visuals, you can do a lot more with it, and yes, there's a lot more freedom in that, which I think is really cool. I'm just kind of curious, I don't know if this is something you want to dive into, but do you want to talk a little bit more about the bird's eye view of the whole design process, let's say at Blind or somewhere, if the client were to reach out to you, what's the typical steps from when someone comes in the door to the project coming out the door at the very end?
It's a little different today than it used to be. Today, the way we begin our projects with our client is we start with understanding their business goals, their business needs, marketing, etc. And more importantly, we try to understand who their users are and what their pain points and challenges are. And we will develop the strategy with the client. And from the strategy, it informs us a lot about what shape of thing that we need to build. Do we need to build a website? Does it need to include a video? Is it a new identity system? Is it some interactive showroom? We just don't know. So we begin with this kind of discovery. We facilitate it. We gather and gain insights into what the goals are, and then we get into production mode. So our process has expanded at the top end, at the very beginning, in terms of what we do, how we do it. The production part has remained relatively the same. We write words, those words get transferred into images, mood boards, things like that, get client sign off, and then we start to build things out. And we take a very progressive approach in terms of saying, we're going to peel back one layer of the onion at a time with you, so that you can see what's going on, so that there aren't any surprises at the end. We're not that kind of design shop where we go away for 3 months and come back and say, here's your finished spot. What do you think? Mm-hmm. That doesn't work for us. That's not the kind of style we like to work in. So
it's not Mad Men.
Yeah. We want to collaborate with our clients and make sure there's buy-in along the entire way, so that you don't get those late cycle revisions that tend to happen if they're not clued in on the process. So that's kind of how it is in a nutshell.
Cool. I love that. Yeah, there's one project I did in New York. I won't say who it was for, but actually I can't. It was with Buck, but it's basically their clients their client had a client. Basically, they're an agency in France, and their client was this beer company. And basically, we didn't know that they didn't have final sign off on anything, and they weren't showing anything to their client at all. And so, while we had that, aggressive feedback going back and forth, showing everything, communicating, making sure they're satisfied until they're 100% loving it and writing it off. And then they showed it to their client, who was just completely did a 180 on everything. And this isn't like a small project. This is a 3-month project involving creatures, and the entire show is all about fire. And basically, the client in the very end, because it was a fiery phoenix, they decided they don't want fire at all on this phoenix, which is contradicting in itself. But I think it's really amazing when you do have clients who or if you're not communicating directly with clients yourself, if you're not having that conversation, like building that relationship with them, instead you're just assuming that what you give them is going to get finalized and approved, then it's a very one-sided thing. And I think that that's what a lot of clients really value, is when they do go to a firm like a design house and actually get to communicate and build that conversation, and eventually have that dialogue that allows them to get something that they wouldn't have been able to get if they just hired you and got the end result without having that that back and forth.
Right.
So that's cool. I was just curious too about both with taking on projects and doing all that. Like, that's definitely a challenge in itself. But I think also, as you mentioned before about working with creatives, I mean, I think that everyone's unique, and I think that artists, designers, a lot of creatives in general, there's always going to be a very mixed bag of people. And for you, I mean, what do you think are some of the biggest challenges for managing teams of creatives, of designers?
I think probably ego, and that everybody that's involved in the creative pipeline wants to put their stamp, their thumbprint on everything that they do. And if you're not aligned, then it's a game of arm wrestling, and that can be very difficult. And people want ownership and authorship. That becomes a problem too. And they forget that there is a greater good, a problem we're all trying to solve. So the other thing too is design. Like music, it can be very abstract. It can be very subjective. One artist would describe their work one way, while another person describes the exact same work in a completely different way. And so subjectivity, people wanting control and authorship and ownership of the project, getting their ego in the way. Those are some big challenges. It's hard to manage creative people.
Mm-hmm. That's great. That's really cool. You guys especially have such like an amazing talent there. Like Matthew, you mentioned before, and a lot of the other art directors and designers you guys have. I mean, I think it's a bit different when you have a lot of seasoned people. And for you, do you prefer to work with more seniors, or are you more open-ended to bringing in people who are a bit fresh and maybe have a different eye, but obviously a bit more green and need that coaching along the way?
Yeah, to be honest, I really don't care in terms of experience or age. It's really about the mindset and who comes into the equation open and ready to learn and want to pitch in. So for us, just speaking very selfishly for our own studio, I like people who are a little bit more mature in their mindset, who know that, yes, the design matters, but that it's not the only thing. And to realize there's a deadline, a budget, a schedule, and a very finite number of parameters that we have to work within. And if they're good doing that, to me, that's what a professional is. And so we're blessed to have a team of people, not just one person, a team of people who share that same belief. And it takes a while for you to find what that is. And once you know what it is, and how to hire for that. But that's kind of our approach.
Cool. And do you have any advice for like students who are just coming out of school now and looking to really stand out?
A standout student, huh? My general advice to this is be very selective in who you want to work for. So go out there and look for those people, look at their work. Don't just look at it, study their work. And then look back at your work and notice the difference between their work and your work, and do everything in your power to close the gap between the two. The more your work looks like their work, or on the level of quality, the lighting, the composition, the style, the aesthetic, the more likely you are going to be hired by that company.
Mm-hmm. No, that's really great and unique. I haven't heard that before, and I think that's actually really solid advice. And I was curious too, again, this is a bit more of an open-ended question, but branding in general, I mean, and again, I feel like branding, a lot of people have a different interpretation of what it is, but in terms of brand identity and for individual artists especially, like why do you think that it's important for all artists to have that and kind of to grasp having their own kind of personality that people get to see in their work?
Yeah, 100%. Now, a lot of people make the mistake that the best art should win. And in an ideal world, that should be the case. But first of all, best and art, those are two very subjective terms, right? One group will judge it one way, another group will judge it a different way. But I believe in being consistent with the one thing I said before is that you can be a designer maker, but you need to build a community. How do you build a community? Well, they need to know what your beliefs and values are. So it's very important that you understand the energy that you're throwing out there, the brand that you've created inadvertently, what that says about you, and how you want to present that to the world. Because that's how a lot of people, creatives and non-creatives alike, they kind of live vicariously through other people, their heroes and whatever. So we see a guy within the world, his name is Aaron Draplin, somebody who I've had the pleasure of having on our show. He's got a big following. Aaron tells you everything there is to know about him, and it becomes part of the fabric of who he is. So I say that he's successful. He's a successful designer because he's famous. He's not famous because he's a successful designer. And I hope that that makes sense to people who can hear this. Because he's built up following around what he does, the quality of the work that he has to produce isn't judged in the same way. And so here's a metaphor for you, right? It's something that I'm starting to use now more and more. When you think about water, H2O water, it is abundantly available in first world countries. It literally comes from the sky and can be free if you want it to be. Yet there are companies who would charge you per gallon more than gasoline for their version of bottled water. And if you pay careful attention to the branding, the messaging on each package, say from Voss to Perrier to Crystal Geyser or Fuji, they say something very different about each person. And when you understand that, then you understand that, well, water is kind of a commodity. So if you have a portfolio and you just present your portfolio, you are water. What you need to do is wrap that water in a package, in a container that tells your story. And that's when water becomes $3, $4, $5 a pint or a quart or whatever it's measured in.
That's great. All of that. Be like Fiji water,
Yes, very expensive water.
But it's so true. I mean, it's all perceptive value. I mean, I look at human triggers, and I think one of the simple ways, like I think that we all can really elaborate with is like you going on Amazon, and the easiest way, the simplest way to make decisions is to say, well, great, there's two items. One, they're identical in what they're doing, but I'm just going to sort by price, and whatever's the more expensive one must be the better one. So if something is $20 cheaper than the other one, like ridiculously cheaper, there must be something wrong with it. The other one, more expensive equals good is always the math that I try to explain for human triggers and how we tend to really dumb down the fact that we don't want to have to think a lot of the time. And it's the same way that with how we perceive things around us is that we allow other people to put the impression on us, so that way we can learn to react how we should be towards them. So if they put the effort into making themselves be the better, the higher quality, the premium product compared to all the other ones out there, then you're going to be congruent with that and say, okay, well, great. Well, clearly you're the premium product, and therefore you're the better decision, the better choice out of these. So, I think it's so critical. And I think that most people don't put that thought into it. They just simply think, well, if I do great work, then I'll be successful. And it's never the case at all.
Right. Well, first of all, you have to realize people can only hire people that they're aware of. So you can do the world's best work. And like, let's say objectively that could be possible, that you're the single greatest motion designer out there, and you're in a cave and nobody can find you. Well, they'll hire the second, third, fourth, fifth, and sixth, and so on before you, because they just don't know who you are. That's why it's important to build your brand, tell your story, to build a community, and to get your name out there, because people can only hire people they know.
I fucking love that. That's exactly on the lines of what I've always said. And to be a broken record, I always say that you could be the greatest artist on the planet. And if no one knows who you are, then how are you going to get that job? How are you going to get work? I think it's so critical for all of us to get our name out there, to build our brand, because you need to be accessible. You need to be at the forefront of everyone's minds if you want them to hire you, if you want them to think of you. And it doesn't matter if you are better than the other person. If the other person is more accessible, if the other person comes to mind first, they're the one who's going to get the job.
Agreed.
Yeah, no, I think that is so critical. And one thing now that I'm remembering is I do think it's really amazing that you do stay so busy. You're both active at Blind, doing all the amazing creative work that you guys put out, but at the same time you are involved in so many other things as well, and you stay really active. You do a lot of talks. You've got a book out as well, right?
I'm working on it. And
Right.
I'm at the very early stages of that. Yeah, but we have our hands in a lot of different things, Alan. So we're up to almost 400 videos. We're actually over 400 videos. Not all of them are public on YouTube. We've launched, I think, half a dozen courses now and kits, and we're just making stuff all the time. And there are 2 books that I'm working on: Topography Manual, which should have been done by now, and a new book just kind of on having a creative mindset for the 21st century.
That's cool. I'll definitely pre-order them as soon as I can. That's really awesome, man. And I was curious too, like, how do you, let's say with company goals, like with Blind specifically, like, how do you stay focused, like, with the direction you want to take your company? Because like, if I were to look at production work being noise, that's something that's always going to get in the way and essentially steer you in 100 different directions. But obviously, any good leader is going to have those bigger goals that you want to take your company in terms of the direction it should go. And for you, how do you kind of stay on point and try and hit those marks as much as you can while still doing so many other things?
Right. I think this is about management and being able to hire a mature team that understands that there's a creative goal and a business goal, and we can't forfeit one over the other, and finding that balance. So I have some pretty amazing people here, and I hire them, I train them, and then I let them do what they need to do. So I'm not that kind of creative director who's just mucking around looking at everybody's work and saying, that's not good enough, let's do it this way. I want each person to have authorship and autonomy over the projects they produce. And we have an open door policy where if they feel stuck, if they need other ideas, resources, they come to me versus me coming to them. And I think that kind of invitation, that kind of informal review process, I think makes for a better working environment personally. But you do have to hire good people that you trust, that trust you. So there's a lot of stuff that's implied in there. So that's one way that I can run the company and still do a lot of other things. And also to have business people, my executive producer, Scott Rothstein, who also understands me, who comes in, Chris, is what we project to make this month, and this is kind of where we're going, and I was able to save some money here and get some extra money there, and hopefully we'll have a good year based on this. So there's a lot of different ways to run a company, but I like to hire smart people who are well-meaning, who are professional and experienced, and then come and create a space for them to come together and feel safe to do what it is that they do. I also try to remove the fear of being fired for making a mistake. I understand that we're going to make mistakes and it's going to happen all the time. And my only deal breaker is if you don't learn from your mistakes or you pretend like a mistake didn't happen. That gets under my skin. I'd much sooner somebody come in and it's like, I goofed up on that bid, we underestimated, I figured out now what I need to do in the future, versus me saying, did you realize you underestimated that bid and they deny it, because then I know growth cannot happen.
Yeah, I think it's so critical to to realize like failure is part of having growth, and without it, like you're essentially putting yourself in such a safety area that if you're not going to fail, you're not going to learn, and therefore if you're not failing, it's probably because you're trying not to take any risks in the first place. And I got a thing in front of my screen that I wrote, which was attack with urgency and fail fast. I think such a critical thing, just to kind of constantly be able to push the boundaries of what you're doing, and when you start to get that resistance, that's when you can start to adapt. But I think it's with negotiation or anything else too. It's like negotiation doesn't start till your first no. And I think with everything, it's definitely where you get your most growth.
Agreed.
And I was kind of curious with something I was just thinking about now was customer experience. Like, do you guys do anything unique in terms of trying to make the experience with your clients quite different? Like, I always think about how whenever you walk in the door at your studio, the first thing that happens is you see a giant screen. It's like, welcome Alan or welcome Chris. And it's such a subtle, simple thing, but, which I'm sure doesn't take any work to do, but it gives such a different experience to the people coming in, noticing that, like, the room is essentially, there for them, and giving them that appreciation.
Right.
So are you there, by the way?
I think of the entire, can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Speakers died for a sec.
Okay. I think of the customer throughout the entire customer experience, from the moment in which they call you for the very first time until the project is delivered and the final invoice has been paid. And if you design that, this is where I was saying that it's important to be more aware of business, not just designers, because you're a really creative person. You come up with interesting, unique solutions. And instead of just applying that to what you see on the screen, apply that to the entire user journey of what your customer must go through. How do they find you? How did they vet you? Why did they engage? Why did they return? And you think about all those kinds of things. And if you answer that and you design an experience for them that is thoughtful and you're empathetic, then things like having a reserved parking space with their name, a welcome screen, bringing them in, and then sitting down with them to say, before we dive into what this looks like and how we're going to do this, why don't we talk about why we're doing this? Let's spend a moment to learn about what your pain points and challenges are, and let's see if we can understand that better. And if we can also help you understand your users, your customers better, even we're going to be able to do even better work for you. So what's a day in life like for them? And in that way, I think we're very unique. This isn't so much about customer service experience, but our offering is different than a lot of design shops, because most design shops focus too much on what it is they're doing and how they're going to do it. And they don't tend to spend a lot of time thinking about why. Why do we do this? Why does this matter? Why build a website? Why build a 30-second TV spot with exploding robots? Why is that important? And the only way we can have a real dialogue around that is to sit down with our clients and address what their business goals are.
Mm-hmm. No, yeah, it's so critical. Do you have any examples of clients perhaps that you've kind of gone through that experience with them to kind of, again, figure out like what their needs are and how that you're able to then apply that later with the outcome of the design that you're developing for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this doesn't really happen within the agency work that we do. This happens mostly with the client direct work that we do. And I don't want to mislead anybody. When I say client direct, I don't mean like mom and pop bakery store. I'm talking about companies that have revenue or net worth in excess of $500 million or several billion dollars. There are large clients that are out there that don't need the full suite of services from an ad agency, but want that same level of creativity. We are for them. So I'll give you one example. There's a large commercial real estate developer here in town in Santa Monica. And we came into the meeting. They told us we need a fancy website and need to do all these things, and we need a couple other deliverables. But as we did the user profiles for their potential clients, we discovered that, A, they're very affluent. They're kind of power brokers. And there's a very small number of those people that fit that category. So I turned to ask the chief technology officer. I asked him, so how many people go to your website today? He goes, I don't know. I said, just give me a wild guess. I don't know. I can't tell you. I said, well, is it more or less than 5,000 people a month? Oh, no, it's way less than that. Well, how much less? He goes, well, like 227. So 227 unique visitors a month. No, he goes 227 lifetime. And everybody in the room, their eyes like went wide open. If we only have 227 potential people who are going to come to this website, we've been attacking this problem all wrong. We've been building this out for thousands of visitors, and it would be much better if we did a much more bespoke experience. And maybe the website, the thing that you all been talking about, isn't as important as you think it is. So through that strategy and discovery session, we learned that we were overbuilding something that nobody was going to go to. And that's a classic mistake. When a client comes to you and prescribes a solution to you, you should not say, great, let me amputate the leg. You should actually step back and say, well, let's talk about your diet, your family history. Where do you have pain, sir? And you learn a lot about them. This is kind of like the equivalent to a doctor having great bedside manners and really understanding and diagnosing the problem before you kind of jump to a solution. So that's really the thing that I believe is very unique to what it is that we do.
That's awesome. No, everything you're saying is amazing. Yeah, I love it. And just before you start to wrap things up, I'm just kind of curious too about the way that maybe you guys jump on trends. Do you ever look at new tech, like obviously VR being the obvious one, but do you ever have your finger on the pulse to kind of see like what interesting new things are coming up in terms of different technology or different platforms that you can either take advantage of or be able to put out your work onto those different platforms?
Yes and no. I think I focus more on cultural trends rather than technological trends. I'm not an early adopter when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I remember a couple of years back when James Cameron was doing Avatar, it was like, yep, this is the return of stereoscopic cinema. What is that? Ocular offsetting and all this kind of nonsense. We explored that a little bit, but I'm sure people sunk vast fortunes into doing stereoscopic thing, and that all fizzled out. Now the next big thing is virtual reality, augmented reality, or mixed reality, MR. And everybody's like, this is great, it's great. But I have yet to see a great film using augmented reality as a vehicle or virtual reality. I haven't seen it yet because the way you tell those stories are very different. And I don't know. I don't get much from that personally. So let me shift gears then. But I do pay a lot of attention to cultural trends, like because you cannot ignore what's happening in society at large. An example of that. Okay, if you look at the way we consume content, most of it happens online. People are moving away from set-top boxes. They want to get what they want when they want it and the way they want it on the device in which they want it. So this is the thing that network studios and television stations and all that kind of stuff, they can't quite figure that out. This is where companies like Netflix or Hulu or Amazon Prime are going to eat the lunch of CBS, Fox, and everybody else because they're buying content at an incredibly alarming rate. They're spending billions of dollars acquiring new content. So what happens to the commercial? Well, when I subscribe to Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever else, I shouldn't have to be subjected to watching commercials. I've already paid to see the content. So if you're in the business of making commercials, that should be a clear sign that things are going to change for you. And that's where we started to say like 5 years ago, this thing, this ride, this train we've been on for so long, it's not going to last for much longer. So we need to shift gears. And that's exactly what we decided to do and have been successful at transitioning. This is a very hard pivot. So we went from spending the first 18 or 19 years of our company's history really suited to doing advertising and music video work to becoming a brand design consultancy. And that was a massive change for us. So now we work with, I think probably more than 60 or 70% of our revenue comes from client direct work as opposed to agency work. We still do it. We still love it. But imagine if that 60 or 70% of revenue wasn't there, where did that revenue come from? We would probably be doing massive layoffs and downsizing the company tremendously at this point. Now, luckily, since I was paying attention, I could ring the bell. I could start to acquire the skills. I have the space and time and energy to look into what this other stuff is, learn that while the guys are running the company, doing the good work, and then coming back and disseminating the information, training them and leveling them up so that they too can do this. Matter of fact, two of my lead creatives, digital strategy director and creative director, so Matthew and Ben, are out right now in Utah running a strategy session without me. And it's an amazing feeling for the highest we've ever been paid to do strategy work. Awesome.
Cool. No, that's super cool. And I guess within that, like, what are some examples of some of the strategies like that you might apply to some of the clients that you get? Like, what are some of the areas that you guys specialize in that does allow you to really excel?
The thing that happens is what we're looking for is an insight, and creative people are very good at doing this kind of stuff. We're able to see a connection between a telephone and a river, and somehow we are able to bring those two worlds together, right? Most normal people can't see that. That's always a telephone and that's always a river. The two shall never meet. So what we do is we sit down with our clients and we listen to whatever it is that we need to solve. And then all of a sudden, if you talk to the clients in a structured conversation, some things start to bubble up to the surface. So one of our clients is in the tech space, and they didn't have a lot of understanding or empathy for their current client base. And so their challenge is we need to grow the business, but we don't really understand them. And through the strategy and discovery session, we started to realize that their clients, the people who actually buy and recommend their products, are needing a little bit of support. They need to be empowered. And so we wrote and came up with a whole marketing strategy about looking at these people as not just the backbone of their operation, but they're more than hero, they're superheroes. So we started writing copy, having super fiscal vision, and we started developing all these things like Titan of IT, and celebrating who these people were versus vilifying them or just not even understanding them. And that started to change the entire complexion and the way that they speak to their client and customer base. And that's the kind of insight and strategy we're talking about.
That's great. That's so cool. Yeah, and I want to, again, thank you for taking time to do all this. I don't want to take up any more of your time, but yeah, I mean, it's just been really great to get a lot of insight into all of the, amazing stuff you guys are doing, and more importantly, like a lot of your insights too, because clearly I think Blind has an amazing talent base there, but at the same time, it's definitely steered by someone who's got that vision, and you definitely do take things in, a lot of unique directions. So yeah, I think this has been really cool. And for anyone who wants to find out more about Blind, where can they go to do that?
You can go.
I still love the fact that you actually managed to get blind.com. By the way.
Well, when you register in 1995, it's pretty easy.
I was just thinking that, yeah. I just bought a domain yesterday for a company I'm launching next year. Yeah, that was a lot of fun negotiating that through a broker. But yeah.
Yeah. So you can find more information about our company both on our Facebook page and our website. It's blind.com, blind.com.
Cool. That's awesome. And I haven't actually looked. Do you guys have like Instagram and all that good stuff?
We do. I'm not that active on it, but we're also on Instagram. I think it's Blind LA. For some reason, we couldn't get Blind, but Blind LA. And you can find us on Instagram there.
That's great, man. Well, thank you again.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, man.
Okay, I really hope you enjoyed the episode. Again, thanks to Chris for taking time out of his busy schedule to chat. I got a lot of really great insights from this episode, and I hope you did too. I love some of the quotes that Chris mentioned, like every once in a while, we need a champion in our lives to really help make space for us and to allow us to explore what we want to become. There's a lot of really great insights, quotes, and other insights shared on the show notes webpage. If you want to go to alanmckay.com/125, check it out there. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think. That being said, I've got a lot of really cool episodes coming up. I'm actually doing one with Ryan Connolly, who you might be familiar with Film Riot, coming up in a couple of days' time. So I'm looking forward to doing that one. It's been a bit of a turbulent time getting both of our schedules to match. But for me, I'm really excited about getting a lot of more filmmakers, creatives, like people who have a lot of insights and experience to share, to come on and share everything that they have in these episodes. So there's going to be a lot of really cool ones coming up. I'm excited. Like I said, check out the show notes, alanmckay/125, and I will be back next week with a solo episode, really important one that I hope you are able to get a lot of value from. And after that, I'm hoping we can start jumping into some really frequent episodes and doing a lot more of these. So anyway, lots to come. I will leave it there. Again, thanks to Chris, and I'll see you next episode. Rock on.